So, Bonnie, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to talking with you.
Yeah, me too. I would actually love to start with the story behind writing the book. What made you decide to write it, and what was, it's such an interesting thing to be a therapist and then share your personal life too. So I'm curious about what went into your thinking and
Yes.
what drove you to it.
Well, I think in the beginning, what drove me to it was grief. I was really heartbroken over losing Bob. We'd been together for 33 years, and I was 64 and he was 69, and so it seemed way too young for me to lose him. And I started writing. I had written for many years, but I started writing just to express my grief and to record the things that had happened between us that I was afraid I would lose if I didn't.
Mm,
But as I went on, I realized that this core story of me about the sexual conflict between us was something I had carried with me for decades and told a little bit to a few of my closest friends. And I thought there was really value in going out into the world and saying, hey, I'm a psychologist. I was doing couples therapy for years, but I had this thing going on, and I don't want you to think you're the only one who deals with these things.
right, right. We're not somehow perfect while everybody else is struggling,
Exactly.
right? Like, yeah, yeah. There's so much value in being honest like that. So, was it a pretty easy decision then to publish and then share the story?
Well, it was a daunting decision because I've had feedback like, why would you want anybody to know that about you? What are your patients going to think of you? So it was daunting, but I wanted to put it out there. So I just trusted my gut.
Yeah, yeah. So, I'm not even sure where to start. Like, what are the biggest takeaways you'd want readers to have from your story? If and maybe
Well,
that's too
what
broad a question, but
that's okay. Well, the first thing is what I just said. I want you to know that therapists' lives are not perfect. Our arrangement with our clients is that we will focus entirely on you, client, and not discuss our own personal life. And in exchange, we will be paid from our time.
right.
The fact of the matter is, therefore, there's a tendency for clients to think, in the absence of information, that everything about a therapist's life is pretty good. They've got it nailed. And so that's one of the takeaways I wanted people to know that, there's a line in my book. Sometimes the only thing that separates the therapist from the client is the desk.
Right.
So that's one thing. But I also have a lot of other things that are important. I really want people to accept that marriage, long-term marriage it has a rhythm of close and farther apart and times when you're angry and times when you are close, and to normalize that, to not
Mm.
think on a bad month that I should walk away from this. So there's that, and I want people to lower their expectations of marriage.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly have had so many clients. It's like I want it to be like it was in the beginning, this honeymoon phase kind of thing, and our fairy tale belief that in the good relationship it would be like that forever.
Exactly, exactly. And
Yeah.
I mean, we have been taught that with fairy tales, with,
Hmm.
so many movies, especially the rom-coms where they're happily and they go off and there's never a problem again. And so I think our expectations are too high, and I think more so for women than men.
Mm. Yeah, I interviewed a guest who coined the term the romance industrial complex. Like it's a business to sell romance as this ideal.
Oh,
Because
that's
then whenever we don't
interesting.
live up to that, we're looking for solutions.
Yes,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. So how did you go into your marriage expecting those ebbs and flows, or did you only learn that through over time with the
I
partner?
expected that because by the time we got married, I was 30. By the time we got together, I was 32, and I had, had long-term relationships and a lot of dating in between. And so I think my expectations were that yes, there's a natural rhythm, and therefore, when Bob was, shut down and he was not available sexually, I understood it until it got way too long, but I understood it. I expected it. It was fine.
Hmm.
Yeah, and the thing that's really surprising about my marriage is that I knew from the beginning. He told me the first time we were in bed together that there were things he wanted and liked and things he wouldn't do. And I had to make a decision. I had,
Mm.
in those first few months, was I going to sign up for this for the rest of my life or not?
So you actually saw it as okay. I'll take him at his word. It's this or that. I mean, I guess I've talked to so many people who think, well, yeah, you say that now, but I can change you, or it'll change, or I can have some hope that it's not quite that clear cut.
Oh, yes, I did that.
Right. Okay. So so you didn't quite make a decision
No,
by
no, no.
signing up for
No,
this, right?
no, I accepted this is what was there now, but I was hoping that we could change it. And I said, let's go to sex therapy, being the good psychologist. And he said, well, I don't want to do that now, but if it's not better in a year, I will. And that was a promise. I took him at his word at, and he reneged on his promise.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So how I mean, I don't know. How do you recommend that people talk about those differences and those ebbs and flows and that, can we get back on track or can we get closer? How do you advise people to pay attention to the ebbs so that it can flow?
Well, it's often painful for both partners. If a woman's, I don't know, she's had a baby, she's kind of last thing on her mind is having sex when she's got an infant attached to her breast, and that's disappointing and frustrating for a partner who really wants the connection again. And so, but other times there may be inability because you go through menopause and your hormones go down and you just don't feel it, and it's hard for your partner. So I think dialogue is interesting. Dialogue about sex is interesting because it's kind of a minefield. You,
Mhm.
people are really fragile when in that area and talking about it, and you have to create a safe environment with each other in order to talk honestly about it. And it has to do with working to not blame the other person and working to let go of shame, either yours or your partner's, because, I mean, right now we're talking about men and women, but men have a lot of shame as well if their equipment doesn't work the way they want it to,
Right.
and they just want to avoid sex after that.
Right.
So I think but the talking is essential. That to me is, I mean, you can wait and hope and things do change and then it gets better, but
Yeah, normally time by itself doesn't fix
no,
anything, right?
no.
Yeah. So in your own story that you shared in the book, like I don't know, could you talk a little bit about the dance you did with bringing it up or waiting or compromising or giving up? Like what you had a long life together, right? So
Yes.
how did you navigate your own difficulties with the sexual
Did
incompatibility, I
all of
guess?
it, all of the above that you just said. I did
Yeah.
all of it. I talked about it with him. I complained about it. And he was a very open person. So we always had this foundation of honesty and openness with each other. And that was one of the reasons I married him. I just fell in love with a guy who would call me after our first date and say, I think I'm going to fall in love with you and don't break my heart. So, so we had that going for us. But um, uh, I understood. I had empathy for times when he just couldn't deal with it. And, but a month would go by, then there might be 2 months, 3 months, and then I was frustrated and I was getting angry and I was pressuring him and he didn't like it. And so, unlike anybody else I've ever heard of, he said to me, just go out and find it and don't tell me about it. Just do it and don't tell me about it on the side. And I thought, I'm a therapist. This is a terrible solution. That is not
Yeah.
good for a marriage to go and have an affair. It's damaging. But I was angry enough that after a while, a couple of years of this, I said, fine. And I did it. And it was not satisfying for me. I did it
Mm.
out of anger. I did it because I wanted attention. I never loved any of those guys, and I was kind of indiscriminate in who I chose because it didn't really matter.
Yeah.
I did all of it, and then when he finally got curious and said, "So did you ever?" He I told him, but he was shocked at at how extensive it
Oh,
was.
not that you'd done it, but that, yeah, you'd
Yeah,
taken such, yeah,
yeah, right. Because 5 years was a long time,
yeah.
and yeah. So, but we had bad fights as time went on because after I told him, he became more insistent on me catering to his fetishes, and I didn't want to do it. And
Mm,
we had some bitter fights that really brought us almost to the brink of divorce, except
yeah,
that we always were in love with each other, and neither one of us wanted a divorce. So it was never perfect for
yeah.
us.
How did you personally navigate that pressure to cater, would you say, cater to his fetishes, and you didn't want to do it? Like that's a really tough line. It's one thing if it's like, oh, okay, it's neutral for me, but it turns you on.
Yeah.
It's a different thing when you don't want to.
Exactly right. And the part that was probably 70% of it was me neutral and fine about it because in the beginning, all he wanted was for me to dress up in pretty lingerie. Not, it was not my thing. I didn't want to do that, but it was fine. It was easy. And
Yeah.
then he loved to take photographs of me, and I felt beautiful because he made beautiful photographs of me. But then then he wanted to, take a photograph of me standing outside a window. I didn't like that. I felt ashamed of myself because I
Mm,
acquiesced because I knew that if I said yes, he would come to me after he had done that and we would have fun sexually in bed. So I still was motivated to please him, even though I didn't want to. But the hard line for me came when, after I told him about my affairs, he wanted to see me with somebody else.
uh,
And I did not want that, really didn't want that. And so we fought over that. And, really he was angry and shut down and blew apart, and there was no good solution.
yeah. That's,
There
yeah.
was
It's
no,
hard when there's no overlap there or common
no,
ground to work
no.
with. Okay. So it sounds like even his suggestion that you have sex outside of the marriage is connected to that erotic interest, right? Like you with somebody else is.
Right. Yes. But he was sort of titillated by the idea of seeing me with somebody else, but he changed after he found out that I'd actually had affairs. He told me he wasn't angry, but and I only now realize after he died and I started reading things that he was very angry, didn't admit it to himself,
Oh.
and, and acted it out instead.
Mm,
Acted it out like, oh, you did that? This really turns me on. Now I want to see you do it. And like within an hour, he suddenly became obsessed with that,
yeah.
which was terrible for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that gets complicated, doesn't it? That's,
Yes.
yeah. So how did, I mean, you said there was never a solution. Did you just fight about this for the rest of your marriage? What did it remain a sticking point that just never budged, or did?
Well, what happened was when he was 51, I think, he was diagnosed with cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And he was, devastated by the news, as was I. And we set about, him going to treatment. And he was so panicked about it. I referred him to a psychiatrist who started seeing him. And then, I don't know, a third or fourth session, he came out and he said, I told him everything. I feel so bad how I pressured you to do what you didn't want to do. I
Mm,
promise you I'm never going to do that again. And I thought, oh my God, this is like exactly what I wanted, but I could lose you. So it was, and he managed to do that for 4 or 5 years. So
okay.
we had a really great connection that whole time. And then he started getting more depressed and more frustrated with show business. He was a screenwriter. He wrote wonderful scripts, several made, the rest of them this close to being made and something would happen, the deal would fall apart. And then he wanted me to do those sexual things to cheer him up.
Mm,
And so backslid. Eventually, um, he recovered from cancer and he had a good 4 or 5 years, but eventually I saw early signs of dementia in him. And as he changed with that, he stopped pressuring me. I had to go
yeah.
back to work to support us. That's when the balance of power between us changed.
Yeah.
And, I was the money earner. He was more dependent on me. And then all of that sexual pressure and tension from him went away. And we had, I don't know, the last 5 or 6 years of our marriage together was wonderful and close and loving and as sexual as it could be, as he deteriorated.
Yeah.
So,
What's coming up to me in this conversation is in my sense of you having to navigate, here's this person I love, and if I do this, he'll come to me and we can be sexual, or now he's under so much stress and pressure, or he's got can't I mean, trying to balance like where's your line in taking care of yourself and
yes.
what we can give to a partner with all these complicating factors you're
Yeah.
describing, and I don't know if you can sum that up into advice for anyone else who's listening, trying to figure out where's my line. Is it I don't Is there any guidance you could give to somebody?
I do. One of the reasons I did write this story was that I felt I let myself down and I felt shame about that. And in retrospect, I do that I knew better. I knew that not honoring my own needs in that situation was destructive for me. So I want to say to women in particular, because women are so taught to be pleasing, be brave with somebody you love. Have the courage to not just say, I don't want to do this, but I won't do it if
Mm,
it really makes you uncomfortable.
yeah,
And that's one of the lessons out of my book that I want other people to know. And I wish that I had been more faithful to myself in when I was in the moment with it.
yeah. And what are your thoughts about when we have sexual differences with our partner, or different preferences or whatever, versus like true incompatibility, like this just can't go together. How do we tell the difference between those?
Um, well, I think it depends on how much the person uh, it's a matter of degree, how much the person is obsessed with having the thing they want that you don't want, and how much you're willing to go to the mat for yourself or not to the mat.
Yeah.
uh, to advocate for yourself. Because if you're both really firmly entrenched in opposite camps, I think it's really very hard to navigate it.
Yeah.
And some sexual desires are more malleable than others, like
Yes.
fetish is one. There's no cure for a fetish. That's always the thing that excites you most.
Right, right. I mean, my belief is we all have an erotic template that excites us most. Those aren't
Exactly.
going to change, but how attached we are to it or how fundamental it is to our desire, that's a difference. Another thing that strikes me too is like, how do you feel either after or considering this thing? Like you said, taking, the pictures and lingerie, that was okay. That was neutral or fine. It wasn't like what you wanted, but you felt okay.
Yeah,
Versus some of the other stuff, it's like, oh, I sort of feel shame or like I let myself down. That seems like a line to
it is a
not
line.
cross. Yeah.
Um, and I think I didn't tell him about that. I didn't because I knew if I said too much about that, maybe the relationship really would have fallen apart. I don't know. I
Yeah.
didn't want to take the chance. So I said no sometimes and I said yes often and that's how I made that compromise. And part of it was I had tremendous empathy for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I
I
think
can hear that in the equation. It's like a real balancing act between your well being and his.
Yes, it was because he would say to me, please, if you just do this for me, I'll feel less depressed. I'll have more energy. I'll go back, be able to go back to Hollywood and pitch the next five movies, and I can put up with it. And, I wanted that for him. I wanted him to be able to do that. And so I would acquiesce. And plus, he was incredibly charming and funny. So made up for a lot. I mean, there were times, I'd be lying in bed with him. I'd be wearing my t-shirt. And he would say, why don't you get out of bed and slip into something uncomfortable? Or the
I
inside
mean,
knowing,
so I'm just going to ask this: was he also just manipulative? I mean, I don't know, but charming and funny and persistent.
blatant.
But it's like,
It was not manipulative in the sense that it was hidden. He was
mm,
blatant about it. I
yeah,
want you to do this. I'd love you to do this. It turns me on. Do this, do this, do this for me. It was pressure.
yeah,
So I don't know whether it's pressure. It was coercion, I would say, more than
yeah.
manipulation. Just
And he never saw that in reverse. He wasn't willing to do the things you were asking for.
well, that's the thing I agreed to very early on that, okay, if you're not willing to pleasure me with your mouth and your hand, I'll use my vibrator with you because that's a sure thing for me. And I'm not anxious about whether I'm going to come. The problem I brought into the relationship was my own sexual difficulties that long preceded him, which was my fear of imposing on my partner and taking
Mm,
too long.
yeah,
And that was the kiss of death for me. If somebody said to me, I love doing this, I don't care whether you come or not, it was magic for me. But
right,
if I could feel like he was, looking at his mental watch.
right, or his neck's getting stiff or something, right? Yeah,
Exactly. Yes.
yeah,
Then it wouldn't matter. He could be there an hour and I wouldn't come. So because I knew that, I knew that because he didn't want to be there and do it, it wouldn't work for me.
yeah,
That's why I said, okay, we'll use my vibrator and I'll be fine with that.
yeah.
And it was a loss for me, but it wasn't so much of a loss because, I had an orgasm every time with
Right,
him.
you got a nice vibrator. But I'm
Yeah.
just thinking about the imbalance in that, that
Yes.
he wanted you to do what he wanted, whether you wanted to or not,
Yes.
whether you were enthusiastic about it or not, but
Right.
somehow that wasn't going to go in reverse. So
Right.
it's, and
And, and it, yeah. But he gave me a tremendous amount. He brought a tremendous amount to my life that nobody else ever had, and I can't imagine
yeah,
anybody else ever having.
yeah,
So he made up for it in
totally.
other ways.
Right. The whole thing about like taking too long or not wanting to impose on a partner. I mean, I think that's a common phenomenon for women, unfortunately. I don't know if I call it confidence or I don't know what to call it. Empowerment maybe? Like
Yeah,
what are your thoughts about how people can overcome that, advocate for what they need, be willing to like take up the space and kind
that's
of
it. It is
insist,
about that. And you've talked about that on your other podcasts. I mean, it really is about women working to let go of the shame associated with desire.
Yeah.
I want this, and this is how I want it. And I'm okay with that. And that takes work to get there. I mean, I think it does. Letting go of, first of all, I think a lot of women have a tremendous shame about their bodies because they're always comparing themselves to the images on the screen. Hardly anybody looks like that,
Right.
but but you feel like you ought to, especially if your partner, makes comments about somebody on TV or likes to watch porn. You feel like, well, I can never be that for you.
Right.
So, um, but I think having an honest conversation about it where you're not blaming the other person for being the way they are, but I wish that men would be more curious about how women, how their partner feels, what they like, and doesn't feel inadequate or offended if the woman says, "Well, I don't really like it when you do this, but I'd love it when you do this."
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I,
that,
I think in our culture, I mean, I talk about this a lot, but so many people, and I think in some ways it's worse for men, feel like they're just supposed to be a good lover and know what to do and be good at this thing. And of course, who nobody comes out of the womb knowing this stuff. So I think
Right.
that defensiveness or resistance can be insecurity rather than lack of curiosity or concern. But it's like, you know,
Oh, I think so too. I
it's
think
so
they
threatening.
feel like they're supposed to know how to do it. And instead of studying up or asking a lot of questions, they just kind of feel their way along and do what worked. Well, work with one person, so this is what
Right,
I'm
right.
with every other woman I meet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's that.
So you said you shared about your marriage with certain, a few people, good friends or something.
Yes.
I'm curious what kind of advice you got. Was any of it helpful? Because I think sometimes we get advice that's one size fits all. I mean, people might give different advice, but they can be pretty attached to, hey, this is what you got to do.
Right. And I told very few people, maybe just one or two people, my dearest friends who were also therapists and non-judgmental. And really what I was talking about wasn't so much the activity between me and Bob, but my agonizing over whether I could live with it or not. Should I
Yeah,
stay? Should I go? I went through that for years because there was no solution to his tastes being so different from mine. And so I didn't get any good advice other than I feel for you. I'm
yeah.
sorry you're going through this.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can. Is there any advice you could give someone else who's trying to weigh that? Or, I mean, maybe not because every situation's so different, but how did you decide to stay? Maybe how did you work that out? Should I stay or should I go?
Um, well, what happened with me, I wouldn't say is something to generalize to other people because what happened was he was confronted with a life-threatening illness. I was only
Yeah,
I've been with him for 12 years, I think, when that happened. But I dropped everything and devoted myself entirely to him for 6 months while he went through chemotherapy and radiation. And I knew at that time that I would never leave him, that I loved him so deeply, I would never leave him. And so I put that, should I stay? Should I go to rest? And then,
yeah,
but I would not necessarily say that for somebody else. I think that if, in retrospect, it wasn't good for me to sign up for that and not ask him to put himself out to
yeah,
work the change. And I think that women can ask that if they can do it in a kind way. I don't think being angry and demanding works, but I think saying, I love you, I want us to be closer, let's find a way to make this work that feels good to you too. And having the courage to do that, I think is what I would say to somebody else.
yeah, yeah. So I'm also curious how your psychological training and expertise played into how much of that was a part of how you were thinking about things as you're going through all these challenges? Do you think you would have done something different or thought about things differently if you had not been a psychologist?
Absolutely. I don't think I would have given him such a pass.
Oh, really? So the
Really.
the professional training made you more
More
like
empathic, more understanding of where it came from, more
uh
curious about it, more making allowances because I knew how complex sexuality is and how, we can't really, our proclivities kind of come to us at such an early, I
yeah,
mean,
however they come, we have no
however
idea, right?
they
But
come
yeah.
unbidden,
Yes.
unbidden. Start masturbating and a little story comes into your head. And you didn't invent it, but it's there. And so yeah, I do think if I hadn't been a psychologist and were unseen other couples also who were going through different things that I didn't have a problem with, which made me appreciate my marriage more, I think I would have been less patient with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know how long it's been since he passed or if you've been in another relationship, but I'm curious, what are you certain you would do differently now? You've had this long, wonderful life with him with ups and
Yeah.
downs, right?
Yes.
Challenges. What would you take away from that?
Well, I want to take away from that is advocating for myself, which I do, and I am in a new relationship, and it's very different than the one I had with Bob, but it's really a good relationship for me at this point in my life, having been through everything I went through, and he is great in ways that Bob was not, and he's not as good in some of the ways that Bob was, but it's really right for me now. So, yeah, but I would not compromise myself again.
Yeah. So you've taken all that experience and
Yeah.
doing it the way you want to now.
Yeah, I deserve to be
Yeah.
my desires respected.
I mean, this is what life is for, right? To live through all these things and have the contrast, the positives and negatives, learn for hopefully do better, right? Start to
Yes, if you live long enough.
eventually we get to a point where maybe I can do it the way I think I should. Right?
Yeah,
We
yes,
hear
it's
that.
not easy. Not
Yeah.
easy.
So tell people about the book. Where can they find it? Do you have any, I don't know, anything else you want to let people know about?
Well, it is kind of full of those sexual secrets, but it's also about how passionate we were with each other and the sacrifice that I think is necessary to stay in a long-term marriage. I don't think there's any marriage without some sacrifice, and I
Right.
think it's important to know that. So I have a picture of my cover right here. Here's the book.
Staying married is the hardest part. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's being published on June 17th. It's going to be released and it's
Okay.
available on all of the internet websites. It's being distributed by Simon and Schuster. And you can pre-order it now. And I would be thrilled if you were interested enough and curious enough to pursue it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing so much of your personal, well, obviously you're putting it out in print, but I appreciate you putting that out for the world so that other people can benefit from that.
Thank you so much. I think what you're doing is such a terrific offering to the world in and of itself.